There was a wide wooden door with a key beautifully carved on the front of it, and one rusty lantern hanging on the side. "Thank you, Joel, for all of your help. You saved my life back there." "Aw, it was nothing. Good luck to you," he says. "I wish I could hug you, but I know I'm too small. Till we meet again," he says with a great big smile on his face. "Yes, till we meet again, Joel." Joel watches Salynia grab the lantern, open the door, and go inside. "Salynia," he called out, "you'll know when you have found the troll keeper of treasures. You will be surrounded by a terrible mess of books if you don't smell him first." The door slowly creaked as it closed behind Salynia. There were stairs that wound downward, and it was darker than outside. Sticky webs clung to her face as she began down the narrow stairs that started off inside of the tree. But as she got further down, the walls were rock and dirt. It was somewhat cold, and she could not tell if there were bugs crawling on her or if it was just the roots of the tree brushing across her face. Her dull lantern flame flickered as it fizzled out. She felt lonely, afraid, and did not know what was going to happen next. She held onto her necklace and held it tightly. As it began to beat, a calm came over her. Salynia knew what the villagers thought of her mother. She knew they thought of her as evil and ugly. But she felt differently. Her mother was kind and loving towards her. That made her, in Salynia's eyes, very beautiful. There was not anything that could change her mind about that. Salynia stopped, put on her hood, then called out to her mother. "I need you right now, Mother. Please." She hears her mother speak to her. "I am here, Salynia. Are you okay?" she asks. A tear drops from Salynia's eye. "Yes, I'm fine. I just needed to hear your voice to keep going. It's very dark down here, and still I have seen no troll." "You're almost there. I can feel it. Just keep going." "No, I am with you," says Castellan. She immediately started feeling better and wiped away her tears. "Okay, Mother, I'll keep going," she says. She continues down the steep, windy stairs until they came to an end. There were 2 entryways for her to choose from, so without thinking twice, she went to the left. There were beautiful golden lanterns with crystals dangling from the bottom, hanging on the rocky walls, so it was easier for her to see. The stench of a horrible musty smell greets her as she sees a door that slightly opened with a dim light showing through. Covering her nose, she slowly pushes the door open to find a troll sitting in a chair at its desk, working with his back turned. The room was filled with books, stacked up the wall, on high shelves, on his desk, and even on the floor. Salynia quietly pushed the door open and stepped into the doorway. "What are you doing here, human?" shouts the grungy little troll. He turns around in his chair, staring at Salynia with his very, very thick smudged glasses. He hops out of his chair, and he isn't any taller than her waist, but the smell of him traveled pretty far. He smelled of old musty garlic cloves and rotten toast breath. His clothes were filthy. His hair was matted along with having thick, green, dry, bumpy skin. She could tell that he could barely see her because he was facing the wrong direction. "I'm over here," she says, waving her hand. The pungent-smelling troll starts sniffing in the air and found his way to Salynia. "You're too tall. Bend down," he says. She bends down on one knee in front of him. A spider crawls from his dusty hair onto his face. He smacked it, then ate it off of his hand like it was nothing. Salynia was appalled. "Like I said before, what do you want?" I'm looking for the book of Enchanted Light, she says softly. Putting his hand up to his ear, he says, Speak up, girl. I can barely hear you. She speaks louder. The book of Enchanted Light. I'm here for it. The troll sighs. I should have known. Well, what do you have for me? He says, rubbing his hands together. Salynia puts her head down and says, I do not have anything. He looks her up and down very closely. Give me that necklace, he says. No, she says, grasping it. You can't come down here with nothing and then expect something. Besides, the Book of Enchanted Light is worth more than that necklace anyway. He groans. I have this dagger, she says, and pulls it out of her pocket. No, he says bluntly, and starts to walk back to his messy desk. But you haven't looked at it. There is only one dagger we are interested in, and that dagger has been lost for hundreds of years, since the fall of Haltura. So what else do you have? Putting the dagger back into her bag, Salynia is starting to feel hopeless and becoming very worried that she will not get the book. Please, Mr. Troll. Hadius is my name, he interrupts with a smug face. Mr. Hadius, there must be something, she cries. He turns around, walking back towards her, then stops in his tracks. I sense something very magical about you. Do you know magic? Do you have something magical on you? He asks. He steps closer and he begins to feel her face. His hands were rough and his nails were yellow, jagged, and dirty, but Salynia let him feel anyway. Your whole being is true magic. What are you? Who are you? I'm a girl, and my name is Salynia, she says, looking confused. No, you're more than that. You're special. He seemed to be especially interested in the white hair that hung hidden underneath her black locks. He smelled it and rubbed it across his rough face. I'll take your hair, he says. My hair? You want my hair? Okay, I can give you a lock of my hair, she says, shrugging her shoulders. He walks back to his desk, opens a drawer, and takes out a large pair of golden scissors. Those sure are big just for a lock of hair, she says. Walking back to her, Hadius seemed very eager to cut, but she quickly stopped him. Wait a minute! Where is the book? I will need to see it before you cut my hair. Is that fair? She asked, pointing her finger in his face. Deal! Book of Enchanted Light, please show yourself, he says calmly. A thick white book trimmed in gold floats down from the very top shelf, leaving a trail of golden dust behind. She watched as it stayed afloat in mid-air. Salynia was admiring the book. Then, snip, and the Book of Enchanted Light had fallen to the ground right in front of her feet. The troll had cut more than a lock of hair. He cut all of it. You cut all of my hair, she yelled, holding onto her head. You were only supposed to cut a lock of hair, not all of it, she said, scolding the troll. I never said a lock of hair. You did, he said, snickering. What do you want with my hair anyway, she says. I don't know just yet, but we'll think of something, Hadius says, stroking it. Salynia grabs the book, puts it inside of her bag, and runs for the door, slamming it behind her. As she's running down the long path, she put her hood on and thinks of her mother, then says, "Show me the way." Her cloak and bag began to glow very bright, like the day she was born, so bright it illuminated a trail in front of her. She follows the trail down the long pathway and up the dark, winding stairs until she reached the Blackheart River. Holding her bag tightly in hand, she continues to run as fast as she can, remembering what the angry water lamia told her. She hears taunting and evil laughter as water splashed in the distance behind her, but it seemed to be getting closer. She turns her head to see a group of water lamias were following her, jumping in and out of the water. "You'll be sorry. We'll never forget what you did. You will pay with your life," they were hissing. She just continued to run until she could see the light outside of the hollow point tree. Once she got out, strangely they stopped chasing her, but continued to call out to her. "We'll never forgive you." Castellan grabs Salynia from behind and scares her to death. She could not help but to scream. Tears were running down her dirty little cheeks, causing smudges. "Salynia, it's me! It's me, Salynia!" Castellan said, holding her closely. "You're okay. I'm here now." "Mother, I don't ever want to go back into that horrible place ever again," she says, uncontrollably crying. Castellan wipes away Salynia's tears. "Don't worry. You're okay now," she says, comforting her. Little did they know the water lamia that warned Salynia was still lurking in the waters. "Mother? So the witch has a daughter. Interesting," she says to herself. "That nasty old troll Hattie has cut off all of my hair for the book," she tells her mother. "Let me see." Castellan removed the hood, and Salynia's lovely, thick, spiraled locks fell down past her shoulders. "My hair! It grew back," she said happily. Castellan holds Salynia's face in her hand, telling her, "There's nothing that can harm you in any way, for you are perfect." "You have been through a lot. Let's go," says Castellan. Salynia quickly shifts back into the white cat as she hopped onto the back of Castellan's broom. Tired and very dirty from her escapade in Hollow Point Tree, Salynia lazily enjoyed the long ride home with the cool breeze blowing through her fur. But there were times that she could hear the threats of the water lamia in the back of her mind. She was hoping that she would not have to ever return to Haltura. After their long voyage, Salynia could tell they were home as the ash began to lightly fall onto the tip of her nose. She looked down as they flew over their ragged yet cozy cottage and could see the footsteps of someone tracking through the forest. But she couldn't see the person who was leaving them. "It looks like someone has been nosing around our forest," said Castellan. "Maybe it was a villager," Salynia says. "Those are footprints of a child," Castellan points out. She knew that sometimes the villager children would come around trying to get a peek at her, to see if she was really a witch or as hideous as the others would say. So she paid the footprints no mind. Salynia hops off the broom and once again changes to human form. She wanted to know who was snooping around their cottage. She knows of the obnoxious children, but there were only one set of footprints, which meant this child was alone. Salynia headed out to the forest. "Where are you going?" asked Castellan. I'm just going for a walk so I can relax a little bit." "Well, don't go too far. We have a lot to do. And don't pass the edge of the forest. I know," says Salynia. She follows the footprints quickly as possible because they are beginning to fade away due to the falling ash. She gets into the middle of Talmer Forest and the footprints disappear. Now, where have they gone? She says to herself, looking around on the ground to see if she can find them again. She hears a loud thud and looks up to find a boy lying on the forest floor. He had fallen from the top of one of the trees. She runs over and asks him, "Are you all right?" He moaned, holding his back while rolling on the ground. "Here, let me help you up," she says, holding out her hand. He reached over and she helped him up. "What are you doing in this forest? It's dangerous," he asked. She knew that she had to think of something to say quickly because she was not even supposed to be seen by anyone, let alone talk to them. "I got lost. I was on my way to my grandmother's just east of here." "You'd better be on your way then. This forest is dangerous. I heard there's a witch that lives out here, and she'll put a spell on you if she catches you. Maybe even have you for dinner," he says. She barely heard a word that he had said. She had never seen a village boy up close before. She admired his grayish blue eyes, freckled nose, and dark hair which was covered in ash. She started to laugh. "What's so funny?" he asked. "You are covered in ash," she giggled. "There is no time for laughter. This is serious. There's a witch in this forest, and she could be watching us right now. I saw her house with my own 2 eyes. We better leave." He grabbed her hand and began to pull her. She snatched away from him. "Get your hands off me! I can handle myself. Besides, I'm not going in that direction." "How would you know what direction you're supposed to be going? You're lost, remember?" he says. He looks at Salynia as if he's confused to why she doesn't want his help, then shrugs his shoulders. "Suit yourself. I'm leaving. Good luck to you." The boy runs in the direction of the village, and Salynia watched until he disappeared into the ash. She was amazed that she actually met a village boy, and she noticed that he wasn't anything like her mother had explained. "Salynia, Salynia, come home. We have lots of learning ahead of us," her mother said. Salynia returns home, and Castellan thought she seemed a bit strange, but thought nothing of it. Salynia took the Book of Enchanted Light from her bag and opened it. The book was written in a language that she had never seen before. "Mother, I don't understand." "It is written in language of the Camdalocs. But do not worry. I have already taken care of that problem," Castellan reassures. Camdalocs were 9-foot tall, gentle, but very unsightly creatures. They were known to all as the guardians of the fallen kingdom of Altura. Castellan had already begun mixing a potion made from the tongue of a wise toad that she had retrieved from the villager the day that Salynia was born. Castellan used a ladle to scoop some of the purple potion from her cauldron and poured it into a cup and placed it on the table. "What are you doing with that?" asked Salynia, scrunching up her nose from the horrible smell. "You are going to drink it," she answered. Salynia had a feeling that it was going to taste awful, so she began to prepare herself for the worst. She took off her dirty cloak, then placed it on the chair next to her. The dagger had fallen from her pocket, so she picked it up and placed it back into the crystal case upon the mantel, then sits back in her chair. "Go ahead, drink it," says Castellan as she is pouring the rest of the potion into a bottle. Salynia hesitated as she picked up the cup, then sniffed it, even though she already knew it had a terrible smell. Her mouth began to fill with water, feeling as if she had to throw up. "Just drink it!" her mother snaps. Salynia closes her eyes and gulps down the potion. "Oh, that didn't taste bad at all. But why does it smell?" Salynia's head hits the table. The potion had knocked her out cold, but Castellan knew that this was about to occur, so she patiently waited for her to wake. When she did wake, her throat was feeling very dry, so she was trying to ask for a drink of water, but instead of talking, she began to croak. Signaling for help while holding on to her throat, nothing would come out but the low grumbles of a toad. As she struggled to speak, her voice would sound more and more like her own, except she was speaking in the language of the Camdalocs, a language that Castellan could not understand. Her eyes began to beam golden light as she stared into the book. An unexpected wind blew the pages rapidly, tearing them out, twirling them all over the room while knocking potions and books off of the shelves. Salynia raised her head and looked at Castellan, saying in the deep, unrecognizable voice of a Camdaloc, Castellan had a look of disbelief on her face, runs over to Salynia and shakes her until she comes out of the trance. Salynia slumps over into her arms and exhales golden dust that surrounds the crystal-cased dagger and disappears. Holding Salynia closely, Castellan was in shock, but chose not to tell Salynia of what had just occurred. A little bit dazed, but now conscious, Salynia sits up and looks at her mother. Did it work? Can we read the book? I feel so dizzy and weak. Is it from that horrible smelling potion you made? I hope I only had to drink that once, she says, licking out her purple tongue. Yes, Salynia, it worked. Just rest for now, and we will start at sunrise tomorrow, she says while caressing Salynia's head. Salynia goes to bed for the night, and Castellan cleans up the mess. Gora watches Castellan clean and asks her, Do you think that was the right thing to do? She is still young. You know what happens when the young possess something like this that is so powerful. It can go horribly wrong. Castellan gives her a cold stare. She is my daughter, and if I say she is ready, then she is. I think it is best you stay out of this. Gora did not say another word, but she knew better. Oh, Gora, my sweet Gora, forgive me for being so callous, but I have a lot on my mind. I just want the best for my little girl, she says while cuddling her. Before Salynia knew it, the sun was rising and radiating through the small window above her bed. Still feeling a bit sluggish from the night before, she places her feet on the floor while stretching her arms and yawning. She rubs her forehead and feels where a small knot had grown from her spill. Her memory was still a bit foggy too, not able to really remember what happened after drinking the potion. She then got a boost of energy, remembering that she could now read the Book of Enchanted Light, and was very eager and excited to start her lessons. She darts to the table and opens the book to the first page. It was thin as a leaf with a large golden K stamped in the middle. She quietly begins to read to herself. Once open, the light will oversee your destiny into a life journey of nobility. Only the brave of heart, mind, soul, and body shall confound the impure to protect the innocence of all Haltura. With this book in hand, you shall be its preservation, as it shall too be yours. Castellan looks over Salynia's shoulder and asks, What are you reading? I'm reading this entry into the book. Castellan looks at the book and sees nothing. What entry? That is a blank page, she says. Salynia shuffled through all of the pages in confusion, knowing that what she had just read was in the front of the book. Maybe you're still a bit baffled from last night, Castellan tells her. I'm okay, Mother. I'm ready to learn. Where do I begin? She says with determination. Castellan was impressed by how she was so eager. From page 1, of course. It is important that you know this book from beginning to end. Salynia turns the first page and begins to read aloud. All spells must come from the good of heart. Let not evil guide your decisions. May you use these spells for all and gain respect from many. Salynia studied through the whole day until her eyes were tired. I think that I have already learned one spell, she tells her mother. Okay, show me. This is the spell for vanity. It says that this is the easiest spell to cast. So here we go. Salynia tells her mother to sit down in the chair, then walks behind her and pulls her thin hair to the back. What's happening, Salynia? She asks. Shh. Let me concentrate. The look of beauty to be. Give it to her and take some from me. Salynia then runs her hands through her own luscious hair, then does the same to her mother's. But as she rubs her hands through Castellan's long stringy hair, it begins to change. It turns from scraggly and thin, silver and black hair into luscious, long, wavy, and black that grew down to her waist. Castellan immediately felt the change, for her head became a little bit heavier. My hair! It is beautiful, just like when I was a young girl. She runs her fingers through it and swings it around. She was truly happy. Salynia, you did it! You have done your first spell. This is wonderful. The two of them begin to dance around the cauldron with joy. I can't wait to see what else there is to learn. I'm so excited, says Salynia. Let's just see, says Castellan. She reaches for the book, and as she touches it, the book burns the palm of her hand, burning it so bad that blisters had already started to form. Foolish book! She yells. Mother, are you okay? Asks Salynia, trying to check her mother's hand, but Castellan quickly pulls it away. I'm fine, Castellan says angrily, then storms away. Salynia picks up the book and can see her mother's singed handprint blowing off of it. She watches her mother rub her aching hand and wants to help. So she looks through the book for a healing spell. It called for rose tea leaves and a little bit of blue blood from a sapphire beetle. Her mother had just enough of the blue blood left on the shelf, but the only place she could find the rose tea leaves were in the village. She knew her mother would not let her go down to the village, so she had to come up with something clever. I'm going out into the forest to explore so that I can find some simple ingredients, she tells Castellan. Knowing that there wasn't much to find, Castellan agreed to let her go. Salynia grabs her cloak and runs out the door. As she walks through the forest, she can hear the slow movement of the branches popping and cracking, as if the souls of the villagers wanted to break free from their imprisonment. The low, deep moans of sorrow hummed in tune as she passed by, nearing the edge of Talamer Forest. It was then that she realized there were no birds, no butterflies, and not one blade of grass throughout her ash-filled home. She was growing up in a confined space of gloom. As she crossed over into the meadow, she felt a feeling of ease along with the breath of fresh air. She was excited to go to the village and remain in her human form, not having to hide from anyone. She takes off her cloak, then shakes off the ash and puts it in her bag, and walks down the path of grass that was worn away from the villagers coming to see her mother. She could already see the village below. It was filled with all kinds of different people and interesting things that she had never seen before. There were kids running and playing. People were selling and trading, and there was even beautiful music that played as the women danced in their long, colorful dresses. Salynia runs down the hill and sees a sign that reads, "Welcome to Pentarium's Creek." Now down into the village, she sees faces never seen before, and a couple she had seen. Old, young, beautiful, and the not so beautiful. But she didn't care. She was just happy to see new things, although she did stand out a bit. Her gray dress and black stockings were not as colorful as what the other girls were wearing, and they had on dainty shoes while she had on a pair of high-laced boots for walking through the ash. People stopped what they were doing so they could stare at the unusual girl in their village. She started to feel self-conscious until someone tapped her on the shoulder. "Haven't I seen you before?" a polite voice asked. It was the young boy that had fallen from the tree. "Oh, yes. We met in the forest. You were covered in ash," she said. "I see you found your way out. Did you find your grandmother's house?" "I found my way just fine," she says. "Whoa. Just trying to talk to you since everyone is staring and all. Sorry if I offended you." Just as he begins to walk away, Salynia stops him. "I'm sorry. It's just that "You're what?" he asked. "I'm just not used to talking to strangers." The boy puts out his hand and says, "I am Xavier. Now we're not strangers." She just looks at his hand, not knowing that she was supposed to shake it. She puts her hand next to his and says, "I am Salynia. Nice to meet you." He thought it was odd that she did not know what to do, so he shook her hand. Salynia could not help but to blush. "Did your grandmother send you out to fetch something for her? Maybe I can help." She looks into the crowd thinking that maybe she should find the rose tea leaves by herself until someone bumped into her and knocked her to the ground. "You knocked a girl on the ground," he fussed while helping her up. "You help me and I'll help you. You have to be pretty tough to be around here." She then realized that she had made a friend. "So what does she need?" he asked. "Who?" asked Salynia. "Your grandmother. What did she send you for? Do you have a list?" No, there's not a list. She only needed one thing, and that's rose tea leaves," she says. Xavier looks around the crowd until he finds the woman who pushes the tea cart. Once again, he grabs Salynia and pulls her along. "Stay close. It's very easy to get lost in the crowd. People are in a rush and can be very rude." They approach the little woman pushing a cart. Salynia had never seen anything like it. She had everything from tea bags to teacups and all different sorts of loose leaves and jars that hung. Some of them are already in small cloth tea bags. "Hello, children. What will you have?" she asked sweetly. "Do you have rose tea leaves?" asked Salynia. "But of course. Would you like it loose or in the bag?" "Loose, please," she answers with a smile. The little woman puts 2 scoops of the rose tea leaves into a small cloth, then ties a string around it. Salynia grabs it and ties it around her neck like a necklace. "That will be 2 shells, please," she says, and puts her hand out. Salynia shook the woman's hand, not knowing that she was meant to pay for the tea. Xavier began to laugh as Salynia looked at him with confusion. "Do you not have 2 shells, young lady? If not, you're wasting my time," she says with resentment. "Don't worry, ma'am, I've got it," he says, and pulls 2 white shells from his pocket. The little woman gives Salynia a dirty look before pulling off with her cart. "Thanks," says Salynia. Xavier gives Salynia a strange look. He notices she isn't the same as the other kids around the village. "You sure are an odd girl," he tells her. Salynia was very embarrassed and took off into the crowd. Xavier chases her to see why she was so upset, but by the time he got through the crowd, Salynia was nowhere to be found. She had put on her cloak and hid between some cottages, then changed into a white quail. She flew right over his head back to Salynia Forest without him even noticing. When she landed at the forest's edge, she changed back. She was starting to think that her mother was right. Those people weren't very nice. But at the same time, she was glad that she did go to see for herself. "Back to Ash," she said to herself, and begins her walk home. Castellan was brewing some stew when Salynia walked into the door. Her hand was wrapped with an old piece of torn cloth from the bottom of her ragged dress. "Did you find anything interesting on your outing?" she asked. "No. Everything was pretty much covered in ash," she says. "May I please use that last of the sapphire beetle's blood?" "Why do you need that?" asked Castellan while stirring in her cauldron. "I will show you. May I use it?" "Go right ahead, but be careful," says Castellan. Salynia goes over to the shelf and picks up the small bottle of the blue blood and wipes the dust off of the top. "I guess you haven't needed to use this in a while, huh?" Salynia laughs. She takes the ingredients along with her book and goes into her room and sits on the floor. She unties the string from around her neck and opens the bag, smelling the fresh scent of the rose tea. Sure smells good," she says. "2 pinches will do. A drop of blood be blue. Combine them together. Pain won't last forever. Now this blemish will heal for you," she reads as she mixes the two together. A blue smoke rises from the bowl and releases the most pleasant smell as it turns into a blue sparkling cream. Salynia runs out to her mother, unwraps her hand, and spreads the cream onto her blisters from the burn. The blisters bubble, causing a tingling sensation in Castellan's hand. The two of them watch until the blisters bubble down and disappear, leaving a blue stain behind. "That will come off with a bit of water. How does it feel now?" Salynia asks. Rubbing her hand over the healed burn, she looks at Salynia and without warning slaps her across the face. "You have disobeyed me," she shouts. "I could smell the rose tea leaves the moment you walked in, and there's only one place you could have gotten them." "But Mother, I went there for you," Salynia says, crying. "You are never to return to that village with those people ever again. Is that understood?" Salynia was appalled by what had just happened. Her mother had never laid a hand on her before. Holding on to her face, she quietly walks away to her room, trying to hold back the rest of her tears. Lying on her bed, she thinks about what had happened and begins to feel bad that she did not listen to her mother. At the same time, she knew that she liked seeing the different people and the butterflies and the birds, other kids playing, and most of all, she had made a friend, even though he hurt her feelings. Castellan comes into Salynia's room with a look of regret on her face. She walks over to Salynia with her arms open. Salynia gets up and meets her halfway. "I just don't want you to get hurt, my love. Those people are no good for you. You are much better than them. You are pure, and they will take that away from you with their nonsense and hateful ways." she says, hugging her. Salynia looks up at her. I am sorry, Mother. It will not ever happen again. Come eat some stew, then go to bed, Castellan tells her, and Salynia did exactly that. As days went by, Salynia was in the Book of Enchanted Light non-stop. She always had it by her side. If there was anything that she needed, Castellan would send Gora to the village to retrieve it. She would cast a spell upon her, shifting her into a young village woman, so she could get what she needed without being noticed. Castellan was making sure that Salynia would never set foot there again. But Salynia had a plan to make something just as beautiful as the outside world. It was an early morning, and she had to get started on her plan. Mother, I'm going into the forest. I will be back in a while, she says, grabbing the cloak and closing the door behind her. Gora, follow her, and make sure she's not up to anything sneaky. Yes, Castellan. Gora follows closely behind Salynia without making a sound. When Salynia had finally gotten to her destination, she was deep into the forest, somewhere Castellan would never go, and could not see from above because the trees were so dense. This is the perfect spot, says Salynia, looking around at all the trees. She walks into the middle of them and pulls her book out. She reads a little bit more to refresh her memory on what she has to say. She crouches down, then jumps up, springing her arms upward, saying, Away and together! The trees moved into a circular form while spreading apart, leaving nothing but an empty space where Salynia stood. The trees had intertwined, making a domed hollow, creating shade with pieces of light piercing through the branches. Just a twirl of her finger, then vines with budding flowers began to sprout, crawling up from the bottoms of the trees. There were purple, white, and blue flowers coming to life in her creation. She moved her hand in a sweeping motion, and the ash blew away into the forest. Blades of green grow for me, bringing butterflies such as these, she says, releasing 2 white butterflies from her hands. Beautiful soft green grass grows beneath her feet, sprouting dandelions here and there. She takes off her worn black boots, feeling the cool grass between her toes, as she sits down in the grass looking around at what she had created. It's beautiful, but something is missing, she says, wondering what else she could add. Oh, I know. Luckily, she had swiped tears of a swan off of her mother's shelf. She let 3 drops roll out of the bottle onto the grass, and a small pond appeared with 1 large lily pad floating in the middle. And upon it was an elegant golden lotus. The water sparkled as the lily pad softly danced across the pond, making gentle ripples. The trees were not lifeless anymore. They had bloomed into beautiful plush pink cherry blossom trees. Salynia spun around as the flower petals gently fell into her hair. You'd better hope your mother never finds out about this, says Gora, frightening Salynia. Gora, you startled me. Please do not say anything to her. Please, she begs. I just wanted something with color and life. I'm tired of kicking around ash all of the time. Haven't you noticed that you're the only bird of all Talamra Forest? I just figured since I can't go out, why not bring the beauty of nature in? Salynia says, smiling from ear to ear. It is quite beautiful, but I just know Castellan would not approve. She would ruin this place if she found out, says Gora. Well, let's not have her find out. Please, Gora, can't this just be our secret? Gora looks around for a moment. I guess it can be our little secret. But if Kathleen finds out, you're on your own. Don't stay too long, or she will come looking for you. Salynia wraps her arms around Gora's neck, squeezing the breath out of her. Thank you, Gora. I love you, I love you, I love you. Salynia stays for a little while longer, adding a few fish to her pond, a yellow canary, and a few more flowers to perfect her secret hideaway. On her way home, she sees another set of footprints in the ash. Only this time, they seemed to belong to a man, and they were leading to her cottage. She sneaks around to the side of the cottage so that she would not be seen. She could hear Castellan speaking to another woman. So Salynia stands on top of a bale of hay that they used to feed their goat. The village woman is crying, telling Castellan that her neighbors aren't being very nice to her or her family, and she does not know what to do about them. Some dragon's breath will burn them deep, setting aflame eternal sleep, Castellan says, handing the woman a tiny bottle with one small single blue flame about the size of a raindrop of dragon's breath. Drop this breath of a dragon at their front door and repeat what I just said. Then the only problem you will have to worry about is me. If you do not pay me with the crystal eyes of a chandelier fish in 3 days' time, into ash you will turn and forever be mine. Now go! Castellan made the task almost impossible. The chandelier fish only dwelled where humans not dare go, the muddy swamps of the Panglu marsh. The chandelier fish lived deep in the thickest mud of the marsh, and never did it stay put, for it was also a land dweller with legs of a human man that ran faster than any human. The only way to catch such a creature would be to know the lullaby of which puts it to sleep, and the only one who knew that lullaby was the queen of the marsh, Queen Genexa Husabloom. Castellan was sure the villager did not know her. No mortal did. The village woman takes the venom, but looks as if she's not too sure about what she has asked for. I don't think I want to do this, she says. It is too late. You have taken the potion from my hands, and now it belongs to you, along with the debt that you owe me. Leave now. She turns around to leave, and Salynia falls off of the bale of hay, making a loud noise outside of the window. What was that? The village woman asked nervously. Did I not tell you to leave? Castellan says crossly. The frightened village woman runs for the door and on her way out sees a small white rabbit sitting at her feet. She ignores the cute little bunny and continues on her way. The bunny hops into the cottage as Castellan closes the door and shifts back into Salynia. Salynia often wondered how her mother could do such evil things for these people without feeling an ounce of remorse. Salynia felt bad for those who could not pay their debts, because she knew that they would never live in human form again, never to see their families or friends. The life that they knew was gone, and the only thing ahead of them was for their souls to be trapped inside of a dying tree as they suffered in an unimaginable pain. That was something that Salynia promised herself never to be cold enough to take someone's soul. 3 days had passed, and the village woman had not returned with crystal eyes of a chandelier fish, and Castellan was furious. She pulls out a little black velvet pouch, then calls Gora to her side. She sprinkles some black ash over Gora's wings. Go find the lovely lady that was here 3 days past. She must have forgotten that she owes me. So let's show her what happens when one lies and does not keep their promise, especially to me, she tells Gora. Castellan opens the door and Gora flies away on the hunt for the Ananias. 1 hour later, Castellan has Salynia put on her cloak and they walked off into the night. Salynia was wondering why they were walking through the forest so late, but she was about to see why. Salynia and Castellan had walked to the edge of Talamer Forest and hid amongst the trees. "What are we doing here?" asked Salynia as she looks at her mother behind the tree next to her. Castellan did not answer. She had a look of evil that Salynia never wanted to see again. Castellan's pupils had grown large as one eye twitched, and her mother was silently chanting, teeth clicking together. She held on to the tree tightly while digging into the bark, carving out pieces, leaving it beneath her nails. Goose pimples prickled their way up Salynia's body from her feet to head as she watched her mother strangely anticipate something. But Salynia had no clue what. Salynia hears the desperate moan of a woman coming from over the hill. Hunched over and dragging her feet was the village woman who had not paid her debt. She got closer, and Salynia could see that her face was very pale and dry. So dry that her skin was beginning to flake off, leaving blackened bark in its place. Her hair was falling out in clumps. Her nails were rotting and barely hanging on to the skin. Her lips puckered and her teeth dropped from her mouth one by one. While she stared into oblivion, her eyes became lifeless, sinking into her head. Her body contained no moisture at all as she gasped for air. Salynia was afraid to watch what would happen next. Entering the forest, the village woman was losing energy as her muscles began to stiffen. They stiffened to the point where she could no longer walk, feet rooting into the ground. By the way she was moaning, Salynia could tell she was in agonizing pain. She lifted her arms toward the night sky and stood there like a statue with branches rapidly tearing through her scalp. Her clothes then burst into flames along with what was left of her human skin, turning to ash as the rest cracked off, changing into thick, hardened bark. She had transformed into a tree. She was no longer free, but now a prisoner of Talamer Forest. Salynia, saddened and afraid, runs home in the dark of the night, leaving Castellan behind. She did not know what to think. She was clueless to why her mother would want her to see something so brutal. "Salynia, why did you run off like that?" Castellan asked. "I cannot bear to see people being tortured that way. It is awful," she responds with her back turned. Placing her hand upon Salynia's shoulder, Castellan says, "Those people mean nothing to you or me. They must pay the price for their lies. Everyone has to. I just wanted you to see what happens when one does not keep their promise." Salynia could not help but to feel that as a threat. What am I thinking? My mother would never hurt me. Snap out of it, Salynia, she tells herself. Castellan turns around, looks into her eyes and says, "I love you, Salynia, and they are just poison," then kisses her on the head. Salynia still felt the same, but she would never let her mother know her true feelings. "I love you too, Mother." To all of my Enchanted readers and listeners, I hope you all enjoy the second part of many journeys to Salynia, the witch's daughter. And remember to always be yourself and chase your dreams. Love, the Enchanted Empress, S.Garrison.